Hello, everybody. My name is Rhiannon Ray, and I am your Mistress of Ceremonies for this evening. Welcome to our AACUC breakout session, your credit union DEI journey. I'm excited that no matter where you are on your DEI journey, insights from this session will help guide you on the right track. Now, before we get started, I have a few general announcements to share with you. Please note the housekeeping rules for the session. We invite you to turn on your cameras and engage with us through the session with a virtual clap. If you have questions for our speaker, please direct message your question to Q&A in the chat. Remember, unless you're called upon as a program participant, please keep your volume muted on your microphone and/or all devices. All sessions will be recorded and available for after the conference. If you experience technical issues during the presentation, please feel free to send a direct message to the tech team in the chat. We invite you to share your conference experience and comment on our Instagram and social media using hashtag AACUC 2021, hashtag bold, mindful, brave, hashtag commitment to change, and hashtag CTC 2021. We're excited to partner with UNCF again this year. We invite you to donate by clicking on the sponsor site from the conference lobby. At the end of the session, there will be a drawing for prizes donated by our sponsors. If your name is drawn as a winner, we will contact you to arrange the delivery of your prize. We would like to thank our title sponsor, PSCU, and all of our sponsors. You can learn more about our sponsors and exhibitors from the sponsors and exhibitors site in the conference lobby. Their booths will be available through the end of December. So we are in for a big treat today. Our AACUC breakout comes from Emma Hayes. Emma Hayes serves as the Director of Learning and Development for Local Government Credit Union in North Carolina. There she launched the Institute of Leadership, a program fostering a cohesive leadership language. Emma also serves as AACUC's Chief Diversity Officer. As a certified diversity professional, she provides guidance to business partners and affiliate organizations. She leads a team that shapes organizational cultural competence, promotes diverse practices, and encourages inclusion. Emma graduated from North Carolina State University, receiving a Bachelor of Science of Management with a minors in English and African American Studies, followed by a Master of Education in Training and Development. Presenting your credit union DEI journey, please help me welcome Emma Hayes.
Thank you, Rhiannon, for such a wonderful and warm welcome. I'm so excited to be presenting for AACUC today. So glad that you could join us. So I have a limited amount of time, and what I've heard is AACUC starts on time and we end on time. So let me get to it because I've asked her to keep me on task. So what I'd like to share with you today is that diversity, equity, inclusion, as you well know, has become a hot topic here lately and is an invaluable part of the workplace conversation. As a result, many mission-driven organizations like credit unions are signaling their desire to institutionalize and normalize workplace DEI practices. But I promise you, it's not going to be easy. It's a daunting task when you think about what goes into a DEI program and creating that culture of inclusion. So people need new ways to think about and talk about DEI. Leaders need new skills to enable equity and inclusion in their workplaces. And credit unions need scalable ways to ensure that their diversity and equity inclusion initiatives avoid common mistakes and are solid and sustainable. So today I hope to help you identify specific actions that you can take that will help drive the desired progress in your organization. So how do we do that? How do we discuss your credit union's DEI journey and how to get started? We'll do it today with 3 practical tips. And yes, I know they're out of order, but that's mindful and intentional too. We need you to be bold. Those who are most passionate about an issue are often the most generous with their time, their energy, their talent. Being bold starts with self. So to be bold, you have to be self-engaged. Be brave. Be brave enough to promote the longevity of your DEI efforts. There has to be an intentional effort put into people's DEI experiences at your organization. Knowing not only what you experience, but also how others experience inclusion in your organization. That's going to help to create a continuous case for why the hard work and the relentless DEI efforts matter. And finally, be mindful. Be mindful of what you say, how you behave. Be mindful of how you interact and the impact that you have on others. Being bold, because this topic of DEI will inevitably require challenging conversations, it's imperative to make an agreement with yourself to be bold, to stand boldly in your discomfort, to sit there and know that it's okay to be uncomfortable. Discomfort is how we grow. It's how we develop. It's how we mature. That's why they're called growing pains. Otherwise, they'd be called growing joys. Many things that emerge when doing authentic DEI work may feel challenging, but moving through this discomfort is an important part of the work that we do. So don't shy away from it, sit in it. Reveal relevant opportunities. That first step is all about self-discovery, not setting an agenda or duplicating diversity initiatives that seem effective in other organizations, but it involves gaining awareness of the type of diversity within and across the groups and the context in which diversity, equity, and inclusion plays out for you as an individual, your teams, and your organization as a whole. That all starts with you. In order to set a direction, create alignment, and generate commitment to DEI in the workplace or in other types of organizations, someone has to step up. Someone has to be ready to lead that initiative. Those leaders must take the first step. That first step means that you have to articulate your individual perspective. Be willing to articulate your identity, your values, your culture. Consider how experiences of power and privilege may affect your approach and effectiveness and that of others. And evaluate how dynamics of DEI affect or align with your business strategy. By exploring the self-reflective context, you can become a DEI leader and engage other like-minded individuals in your organization to identify the most relevant opportunities for change. Once those have been identified, select 2 to 3 strategy actions that you can implement that will help drive those desired results. You also have to be brave. Bravely promote benefits of diversity. The work of DEI is a strategic lift, but a heavy burden. That's not mine, I borrowed it, but it's true. It takes hard work and effort. It's not for the faint of heart. To do this work, you have to be willing to be the face, to be the voice, and in some cases, the sacrificial lamb for the work that you're doing. To reap the harvest of your labor, you will have to bravely promote the benefits of diversity, bravely elevate the importance of equity, and bravely exercise diversity and inclusion by serving as the role model for what that should look like. There's tons of research out there about how beneficial it is to have diversity within organizations. However, it can be even more powerful to compound that data with some real life stories. The organizational focus groups or creating informal interviews with coworkers and other stakeholders. Create a forum for people to offer stories and experiences about their DEI experiences in your organization. This information gathered from these efforts will not only make a strong case around the need to operationalize DEI frameworks, but it will also help to inform the goals and the strategies of your specific DEI efforts in your organization. These types of efforts don't typically require a lot of money or a lot of resources. They simply require bravery to have the tough conversations, to engage, to gather the stories that will drive this important work that you do. You will inevitably become acquainted with why certain initiatives may prove beneficial for your organizations and why others will not. By staying plugged into the critical feedback that you get from your coworkers, from your members, and for how you feel yourself as you continue and remain brave and resilient throughout your challenge and the transition in your organization. Bravely elevate equity. When discussing diversity initiatives in the workplace or in other organizations, it's not uncommon for many professionals or people in general to refer to diversity, equity, and inclusion using terms that they would think are interchangeable. However, they are not the same. Efforts to promote diversity and inclusion may not prove sustainable without elevating equity. To enact equity is to provide all people with fair opportunity to attain and reach their full potential. To make progress on DEI, we must acknowledge societal inequities and recognize that unintentionally, our organization isn't a level playing field, and that can be a difficult pill to swallow. People enter the world of work and advance through their careers with unevenness of advantage, unevenness of opportunity, unevenness of privilege, unevenness of power. So what is fair opportunity? It's not the same for everyone. Ask your leaders to express their motivation as well as articulate their barriers for countering inequity, setting clear goals towards greater equity, and then taking action to move in that direction. Doing so will signal a commitment that begins the foundation of your organization's diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts. And then bravely exercise diversity. Diversity is a collective of differences and similarities that include individual and organizational characteristics, values, beliefs, experiences, backgrounds, behaviors, so on and so forth. Bravely exercising diversity is a process that involves recognizing and engaging differences within your personal and your professional circles. It requires you to explore the impact of diversity on perspective, assumptions, and approaches, and then identify ways to enhance the contribution of all, not just of some. And we must also be mindful at all times. We heard about our mindful leader at AACUC today, and some of those techniques and methods that she uses to ensure that her conversation leads to inclusiveness. So we have to be mindful of what we say. The inability to have meaningful conversation contributes significantly to the unproductive relationships that can sometimes develop across diversity divides. Work with those whose backgrounds and perspective is vastly different from yours, whose roles or leadership style is at odds with yours. People at every organizational level, not just the top of the organization. All of those require effective conversations. So again, be mindful of what you say. Conversations should be inclusive. Foster direct conversations about DEI to break down silos and communication barriers. After all, better cultures start with better communication. So by improving the quality of your everyday conversations, you'll develop a culture of increased openness, increased respect for differences, increased understanding, which will fuel better collaboration, more innovation, and greater effectiveness. Again, simply by being mindful of what you say and allowing your conversations to be inclusive. Then you need to be mindful of how you behave and interact. Map network connections across boundaries. Self-awareness can help you understand how you are inadvertently creating inequity or preventing the inclusion of diverse people and perspectives. Take a network perspective by conducting a network analysis, beginning with your patterns of relationship and interactions to see if they reveal an over-reliance on a few people or a certain group of people. That will help you see if others are out there who are isolated, or if there are others out there that have value or relative expertise, relative perspectives or connections that are being underutilized in your network. Through mindfulness, you can see how unintentional bias may be entering into your networks and may be creating limitations for you. Using this information, you can identify additional people or groups that are not assessing, set goals to diversify your network, and then take steps to engage others and build connections across silos. But that means you have to be mindful of how you behave and how you interact so that you can map network connections across boundaries. You must also be mindful of the impact that you have. Coaching, mentoring, and sponsoring are all important. Often due to unconscious bias or systems of power in organizations, people who are not like or fit their organization's dominant type often don't have equitable access to leaders who can steer them towards valuable experiences and support them through the changes and the challenges that they'll go through in their organization. As a result, they may see their career progress stall. But organizations can counter this subtle bias by implementing a coaching culture, by creating a network of champions to enable development, contributions, and career growth of all employees. So if you are a manager, you can ensure that all of your direct reports are heard. Give them feedback, provide them with support, remove obstacles, and offer opportunities. You can serve as a mentor and provide guidance and feedback and support, whether around a specific need or whether be it ongoing development. You can also serve as a sponsor. If you're in the room at the table, you can be an effective advocate and actively work to advance the careers of some of those sponsorees with talent that's gone unrecognized, unnoticed. And if you are an individual contributor, you can ask for all of those things. My mom would tell me all the time, a closed mouth don't get fed. In essence, if you're not asking for it, how does one know that that's something you'd be interested in? But remember, when you ask for it, be prepared when you're given the opportunity to make the most of that opportunity. Otherwise, an unprepared requester makes it that much more difficult for those who follow with similar requests. And then be mindful to not just scratch the surface, but this DEI work requires that you dig deep. The concept of social identity can help people understand similarities and differences and their impact on the workplace. Social identities it comprises the part of a person's identity that comes from belonging to a group, including things like age, ethnicity, race, religion, gender, sexual orientation, nationality, so on and so forth. It fuels our distinct perspective and unique value, and offers defined sources for privilege and power. Much of inequity is driven by long-established structures, unconscious assumptions, and experiences tied to social identity. Through communication, mindfulness, and conversation, you can learn to recognize how your very own social identities subtly influence the way that you interact with others, or the biases you unconsciously hold. You can also learn and consider how the dynamics of social identity may be shaping others around you as you experience them. By defining diversity through a lens of social identity, everyone has a way to put themselves into a discussion of diversity, equity, and inclusion. By identifying a few key actions, you can help your organization fast forward to positive, more equitable outcomes, and be willing to fully see, appreciate, and engage everyone across the organization. But you have to be willing to move beyond the surface, dig deep, go beyond what you can see, and discover who's really there. So in summary, your credit union's DEI efforts start with you. Be bold in your approach, be brave in your pursuit, and be mindful in your impact. At this point, I will take questions.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Ms. Hayes. That was an amazing presentation. I know that I was taking notes, as I imagine others were. So I want to pass it off to, if anyone has any questions, please be sure to send them to the Q&A moderator. As of right now, we do not have any questions in the chat, so if you would like to send them. I do personally have a question. So in the meantime, what is a tip that you have for maybe an employee who's not in a leadership position yet within the organization? What do you think the first step should be to proposing their business going on this credit union journey?
Well, I think one of the things that is so often overlooked is inclusion starts with I, right? So it has to be an I first approach. Consider what I'm doing to promote diversity, equity, and inclusion. Look around to find like-minded individuals who would be willing to at least initiate the journey with you. And it can be something as simple as starting with a committee that helps to bring awareness around other cultures, around other perspectives, to broaden people's scope in terms of what they think and how they feel about things that they aren't aware of. It's really interesting to see how we have all of these misconceptions sometimes about a culture until we have an opportunity to be exposed to that culture. So I would say a first step would be something as simple as inviting others to a conversation that starts with I.
Wonderful, wonderful. We had a question come through. Can you give a framework of how to do a network analysis?
Oh, that's a good one. So your network analysis is going to start with taking inventory of your personal network. Who's in your network? So if everyone in your network looks like you, thinks like you, behaves like you, you might want to expand your network. And so a network analysis is simply an inventory of the people that you allow in your personal space, in your professional space, It's the people that you seek advice from, whether it's personal or professional, whose opinions you value. It could be mentors. It could be where you work, where you play, where you worship. Those taking inventory of that group of people will give you a good idea of whether or not you have a broad perspective or a more narrow perspective. And it can also help identify areas where you have some gaps and groups that you may want to find a connection with.
Great, great. Thank you. We have another question. How did you enter into the DEI realm with prior or present employers?
So my first introduction into DEI was actually through Miss Renee. Miss Renee had a vision of something she wanted to do with AACUC. And as you all know, you just don't say no to Miss Renee. She approaches you and she asks if this is something you would be interested in doing. You don't say no. And like her, I am very passionate about the people helping people philosophy. I consider myself to be a servant leader. So the opportunity to learn more about how we could make our industry, how we could make the credit union movement more inclusive, more diverse, more equitable, I was all over it. So she was the first person to say, hey, I think this is something that we need to explore. And she and I just dug in and started to figure out ways we could bring what we had learned back to our industry.
That's very powerful. Thank you. Our next question is, in your experience, what is one thing in your DEI journey that you did not knowing what you know now? What would you have done and what would you not have done? So in your DEI journey, what is one thing that you maybe would like to go back and redo? And what's one thing that you think is super successful?
So I will tell you that I work for an amazing CEO who is very like-minded as it relates to diversity, equity, and inclusion. And one of the conversations that I had with him early on a couple of years ago was, I want to require education. I wanted to require a level of camaraderie and collaboration at the executive leadership level for diversity, equity, and inclusion. And he was like, yes, I agree, let's do this. And so he allowed me to develop a program for our senior leaders that pretty much made them responsible and accountable for the efforts that we were going to, and the strategy that we were going to implement at the credit union. So through several conversations, we created a leadership language around how we were going to talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion, what we thought it should look and feel like at our organization, and then started to put together some steps for how to make that happen. So I was very fortunate in that senior leadership, our CEO was on board, and everyone else was willing, even though uncomfortable at times, they were willing to be uncomfortable to make it happen. What I would do differently is at the beginning of 2020, when the pandemic hit, and we were trying to figure out as an organization, how do we transition from being in the office every day to being virtual? How do we make that work? One of the efforts that we had to put on pause was our DEI efforts, just because people were meeting in committees, but our senior leadership really needed to focus on strategy around how to transition our employees to a safe working environment. But shortly thereafter, social unrest hit. And so then we had to try to then go back to those efforts. And I think had we said, no, we're going to make this a priority as much as safety, we're going to keep this a priority, I think we would not have felt so reactionary in our approach. And we would have been further along in not only transitioning our staff to a safe working environment, but maintaining our commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Okay, and there's kind of a piggyback question on that. So how do you communicate that with the staff? When working at the senior leadership level, I'm finding that the rest of the staff does not know what's happening and we're kind of trying to improv.
Well, I will tell you, it starts with the senior leadership, but the communication needs to be disseminated to everyone on the staff. So we started with the senior leadership, but we started there so we could create a shared understanding. Once we developed that shared understanding, it was communicated across the organization, and we rolled out those efforts, that communication. We rolled out what we thought would be our focus to the rest of the staff. So though it may start with senior leadership, it has to trickle down, and you can't rely on just the senior leaders to pass that information on. It has to be a broad approach to ensuring that everyone receives the same message.
Thank you. Another question that we have is, how do you get more information about this DEI Academy?
So glad you asked about this DEI Academy. We actually have, I'm looking at the screen, we actually have one of our recent graduates of the AACUC DEI Leadership Academy for Financial Professionals on today's call. And I'm going to put her on the spot, and she probably already knows. Miss Kelly, I'm going to ask that you share a little bit about your experience in our certification program, and then I'll give you guys some additional information.
Wow, Emma. Way to put someone on the spot there. Good afternoon and good evening, everyone. I am one of the inaugural members of the class of DEI for Financial Professionals, Academy for Financial Professionals, and it was a week-long saturation of great resources, content, but also speakers in the industry that were able to talk it like they walk it, is really the best way to put it. I mean, they were able to give us wonderful examples of not just tangible resources, but how to put them into practice. And they broke down for us in a variety of ways, week after week, that was also backed by the resources, modules for the content. So we also took assessments in holding each other accountable for the work. And we had cohorts of the final project to give in the last day. So it was really like going back to school again. And in a lot of ways, how we framed it was, you're drinking from the water hose and you're gonna get hit in the face with a lot of information, a lot of emotion, but then you're going to be able to take moments and times away from that to be able to put your own DEI mission in front of you, but also help others understand it and actionalize behind it as well. So being able to give us the words that met the passion, because I think a lot of times we spend so much time in almost like an action bias, DEI, what do we do next? What do we do? What do we do? What, you know, and this academy helped to drill down, frame, and put into perspective what it is that we're after, and that it really is a shared vision that's not just by one person, but it takes a collective to get behind it. So I'm just forever grateful. Emma, I don't know if that was the testimony that you were looking for, but I'm forever changed by the experience, and I can't wait for January for others to be able to go through it as well.
Thank you, Kelly. I just wanted to hear your experience. We do have our next class starting in January, so we will be sending out some additional information at the conclusion of the conference about how to register, about costs. So look for that information to be coming. We're so excited that we are able to offer this to our membership. We believe it is a valuable program that will help credit unions and people who really want to be better DEI practitioners along on their journey. So we're excited. We're looking forward to January. As Kelly mentioned, it is 5 days, 5 full days, and we spread them over the course of 5 weeks. In January, right now, we anticipate being virtual. At some point, we hope to be able to do this in person, but for now, for everyone's safety, will remain virtual. But we're excited about January and our opportunity to share our program with other members.
Wonderful, thank you. And it looks like we have time for 1 or 2 more questions. So one is, should companies have quantitative goals for having more diversity in executive roles at their organizations?
Well, I will tell you this. If you're looking at diversity as a metrics, then we're probably going to miss the mark. Simply because diversity is so much more than what you see. And my dig deep was an attempt to get us to think past what we see in terms of characteristics, but to really focus on what you're trying to accomplish. And if you're trying to accomplish diverse thought, diverse perspective, diverse experience, then I would say, yes, you need that would be good to try to measure. But those things are more difficult to measure. But what you really want to focus on is your inclusion, because that's how you're going to maintain your diversity. I will give you this analogy. If you all will do me a big favor, I want you to imagine, so close your eyes and walk with me. I am a brand new employee. I have just been afforded an opportunity of a lifetime. This is my dream position. The organization has courted me. They have given me benefits galore. Their compensation is more than competitive. And today is my first day on the job. And I arrive, and as soon as I get there, I'm escorted to the front door and I am blindfolded. Someone walks me to an empty room and they sit me in a chair and they gag me. Now, I can hear people pass by pointing and making comments like, who is she? What is she doing here? Why is she here? I have just been given an opportunity that I thought was going to be the best opportunity of my life. But in actuality, what I received was, they took my voice, so they didn't give me a seat at the table like I thought I would have. They blindfolded me, so I wasn't in any of the rooms to see what was going on in the organization. And then they let people who didn't look like me make me feel like an imposter. How many employees do you think would come back for day 2? Would you come back for a day 2 in an organization like that? So all of that to say, it doesn't matter how great you are at recruiting talent. If you do not make them feel like they are a part of your organization, none of it matters. They're not going to stay. So inclusion is as important as bringing people to the table. You want to be able to keep them there once they're there and make them feel like they belong.
Wow, that was wonderful. Can everyone give a round of applause for Ms. Hayes? We still had a few questions in the chat. Just wanted to remind you that we will be recording these and distributing them to you, as well as providing a link to this presentation afterwards. But before we conclude this session, I want to give away some prizes. So today's $100 gift card winner is Joseph Alston Jr. from Coastal Credit Union. Yay! Congratulations, we'll be in contact with you. We appreciate you joining today's AACUC breakout. Keep the conversation going and comment on our social media. Also, if you're not a member of AACUC already, we invite you to join us by logging into aacuc.org. Our last events for the day are the AACUC After Hours Women's Chat and Men's Chat discussions. You won't want to miss them. They're at 6:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And we look forward to seeing you. Remember, be bold, be mindful, and be brave.